So Tun Hanif, thank you so much for doing this interview with us. So we're the Institute for Societal Leadership. Our focus is Southeast Asian leaders or people who've been around, made an impact, and who have good things to share with our younger generation. And that's why we picked you, and we would love to hear some of your experiences and your
Most
challenges.
welcome, Malai Cheng.
Yeah, thank you. The first thing we notice, all of us notice, is your long and illustrious career, especially within the police force. I'm wondering whether there were key events that have shaped you and have shaped your values?
Yes, I wouldn't say the police shaped me. I had a good education in the Malay College, but I would not even say that the Malay College shaped me. What shaped me really were the things that my parents, aunties and relatives, my imam, my Quran teacher passed on to me, as being the values that I should imbue myself with. And also the whole surrounding in those days. People were very ethical. I think we had imbued of the British Victorian values. Discipline, honesty. Integrity.
So how did you become part of the police force? What made you join the police force?
I think it was in a manner of speaking. I was cutting my nose to spite my face. A lot of things happened in my life. I didn't want to go to the Malay College, the elite school. Because I was comfortable in my old school.
Right.
I was top student in my old school. My father was from that school. My father just died in just a few months. And his grave was within sight of my class. And I would go there in the morning, recess time, would go there, before going home at 1, I would go there, And to countenance leaving that, is not on. But I was more or less Shanghai by the powers that be at that time. They told my headmaster, don't have him in your school anymore.
Because you were the top boy.
Yeah, because they wanted me to go to the Malay College. They wanted 5 students, top Malay students, to occupy 5 vacancies there. Okay. So I was one of those. They promised me scholarship. They never delivered that. And I didn't have any money.
So you had to pay fees?
Yes, we had to pay fees. So for the first term, my uncle supported me. But he had 10 children, later on up to 20 children. So he couldn't
That's
afford.
a lot of children.
Yeah, so it was only that first term. Second term, my grandfather, my own grandfather, picked up the tab. Then he died. He died. So there I was looking at the third term. Who was going to finance this? And I had always been the kind of chap who cannot go around with a begging bowl. To my relatives or whatever it is, maybe too proud or whatever, So I wrote to UMNO. This is long before the independence, And UMNO gave me 100 ringgit. I needed only 78 for the term. UMNO gave me 100 ringgit. So that carried me through. Passed my 4th form. Then my grand-uncle picked up the tab for the following year. And then I wanted to go to either Cambridge or Oxford. I rejected all scholarships. Only Oxford or Cambridge. Then they created a special scholarship. 9 of us were awarded the scholarship to go to Oxford or Cambridge. At the last moment, they said, somebody failed to register your names there, So we are afraid that you may have to report to the University of Malaysia and Singapore. Hey, we have rejected Australian universities, other British universities, and now you're asking us to go to Singapore. What a big climb down, you see. We protested, Then they said, please go. Otherwise you'll miss going to Singapore, you also miss going over there. You see? But we promise after you have passed your first year, come and see us. We can discuss about going to UK. So we passed our first year. Out of 9, 5 of us drove in a car to meet. So it so happened the chairman of this committee was Tengku Abdul Rahman's elder brother. You see? So we went in one by one. When they came out with long faces, I said, what happened? Are you going? Long face. You go in and find out. So I went in. Cik Hanif, I see that you've done very well in your first year. So I suppose you are thinking about getting us to send you to UK? I said, yes, sir. Yeah. Well, you know, we are on the threshold of independence. I said, what has this got to do with this? We are on the threshold of independence. And we need every single graduate that we can produce as soon as possible.
Okay.
So what say you if you carry on into the second year in Singapore and forget about UK? Because you would have to start in the first year over there. So what can you say? Is it? What can you say? You have been fired up with this independence struggle, you know. What can you say? Okay, so remain in Singapore. And then I found two of the students there who were with me were given this scholarship.
To England?
Yeah. And off they went. So I thought that was not on.
Yeah.
But they were children of very strong UMNO supporters, you see.
Right.
So to me, that scholarship that I missed in the Malay College, here, this thing again, you know, so I was quite run off. And so when I left the university, I decided not to serve the government, and I went to Guthrie's. Then I got a letter from the government. I signed a contract to serve the government. Eh? So they asked me to report. So I went to see the man in charge, who was a couple of years my senior. You know? So I said, Anas, can I buy myself out? I'll pay you monthly. I'll pay the government back monthly. It was only 7,000 ringgit, you know. So I said, oh no, Hanif, you can't do that, you know. I mean, you either paid 7,000 now, but since you are friends, I'll accept your 3,500 now and 3,500 next month. I said, Anas, what are you talking about? I have got only 30 ringgit left, you know, from my good conduct refund from the university, you see, out of 50 ringgit. 30 ringgit remain with me, 20 ringgit have been spent, you see. I'm wearing my father's shoes, I said, you know. I haven't got my first salary from Guthrie's. Well, I can't help you, you know, I mean, it's that or, you know, you pay the lump sum. So I went to see Guthrie's and they said, you have just joined us, probationer. We're thinking of sending you to Singapore. Okay? We can't lend you the money. So I was really, really down. So I looked at the advertisement, and there was this advertisement about the police force.
Okay.
So instead of joining the civil service, I joined the police force. 3 months into my training, they sent another stiff letter. Either you report or we sue you. Okay? So I said, you read the contract again. It says serve the government. It doesn't say serve the civil service, whatever it is. You know, I'm now with the police for the past 3 months. I'm serving the government. Then they kept quiet. So that's how I found myself in the police force.
So were you caught up in this whole spirit of independence during that period?
Yep. When independence was declared, I was actually still in the University of Malaya. So we had a holiday. We went back. And I was there that night at the Dataran Merdeka, and I saw the flag being brought down, saw all those ladies weeping, you know. Yeah. So I was there, caught up, so happy, you know.
Yeah.
Next day was the real declaration by Tengku Abdul Rahman in the stadium, but I missed that declaration that morning.
Okay.
But quite early in the morning, I went out to town, very happy, so shouting Merdeka, Merdeka, you know. And I was quite surprised. I mean, the town was Chinese, you know. The shop assistants, they were not responding at all. What I didn't realize that time was that the non-Malays were getting citizenships in batches. They had to qualify, you see? So very small numbers were still citizens. The rest were still non-citizens.
So it didn't matter to them whether Malaysia was
I
independent
suppose
or
that
not.
was what it was, you see.
Yeah.
But even at that point in time when it was a Malayan Union, when they were prepared to give the Chinese full citizenship rights, the Indian full citizenship rights, equal with the Malays, they excised Singapore from the equation because they had other plans for Singapore. Later on, when they give independence to Malaya, Singapore would be out, still be the colony, is it? So because of that, it was a shock to the Chinese, is it? Because with Singapore, they were the single largest community. Yes. Without Singapore, they're equal to the Malays. Yeah. But with the Indians, they would outnumber the Malays, you see. So they didn't like that position. Also, they didn't like the idea of accepting the Malay rulers. The Malays didn't want independence because they were not ready. The British kept the education to standard 6, only to primary 6. That's why when Tengku went to see the council rulers for permission to discuss the British independence, the Sultan Kedah said, look, I think what is better is to improve the education of people so that they don't become prey to demagogic politicians. Johor simply refused to accept independence. We are a nation that cannot even make needles. How can we be independent? So they wanted to be under British protection, you see? But only these two. The rest, they acquiesced to it. So that was how discussion went on for independence.
These are insights we wouldn't be able to read from any textbook. And of course, the most difficult part of Singapore's history is during the time of the Federation of Malaysia. Can you give us some insights into the events leading to it and the events after it? Were the Malays keen to have Singapore as part of the Federation in the first place?
Singapore was pressing for independence, you know? How could you give to Malaya without giving to Singapore? You see? So, in fact, I think David Marshall went to Britain to demand independence in 1956, before the Malayan independence, and failed. British just wouldn't listen to it, you see. So he came back and resigned, you see. Part of the agreement for our independence was that we would also help to look after security of Singapore. They've been working on him, you see, to take in Singapore as a rationale for giving Singapore independence. It's got to be independence within Malaya. Also, because we had defeated the communists, and here the communists coming up. Tengku and his colleagues' main worry was that the inclusion of Singapore would again bring about the situation before the war, where the Chinese outnumbered the Malays. So the problem for us was not that we didn't want Singapore, but how could we dilute this problem, you know? How to absorb Singapore, is it, without being a problem to us. So in the discussion with Singapore, look, we must have some understanding, you know. You'll be the New York, we'll be the Washington, you see. You don't take part in our local election, you see. Things like that, you know. But after the first year, then of course, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew decided to go the whole hog, you see. And that started the bad blood.
To campaign for the PAP in Malayan territory.
So that was what started it. But Tengku was very honest. He said he had made promises to Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, you know, about economic independence. He could develop to be in New York, blah blah. But he said, Tun Tan Siew Sin, our finance minister, being head of the MCA, that was being challenged by PAP, you see? He was putting a few spanners in the work. So that irritated Lee Kuan Yew, you see. And so Tengku said that, you know, that Siew Sin was partly to blame.
Singapore celebrated 50 years, and then things of the past are starting to come up. And one of the controversial events was Operation Coastal. I don't think young Singaporeans realize how serious the communist threat was to necessitate detaining these people who seem like fairly straightforward, sincere folks. What is the Malaysian perspective on that? Was the communist threat so serious?
Yes, because we had our representation on the Singapore Security Council, and of course we had very close working relations with Singapore Special Branch here, you know, and the British SAIF office and so on and so forth, you know. In those days, we even had not only the MI6 but also the MI5 here, operating both in our territories. And so we knew fairly well what's going on, and we could see that Lee Kuan Yew was losing to the Chinese educated, led by Lim Chin Siong.
Yes.
So much so, the British Governor General felt that perhaps, you know, Malaya not moving in, that perhaps they should reach a modus vivendi with the Barisan Socialists. Yeah? So he called for a meeting with the Barisan Socialist leaders, Lim Chin Siong Company, at his residence, you know, Eden Hall. They had a tea party, blah, blah, blah. I think in the discussion, they said Britain will hold to the democratic principles. If the Barisan were to win by democratic means, they're prepared to accept Barisan to form the government, provided, provided the naval base will remain British hands, provided defense and foreign affairs remains with the British. So I think Barisan was prepared to accept that, you see. It was at that stage that we had discussion with Lee Kuan Yew. I was one of a group of officers sent to work in Robinson Road here to look at the total communist threat, and we were allowed to look into all the files to prepare files for their detention, you know. We had to update all these files, taking other people on, you know, and update. So I was engaged in this thing twice. So it was arranged that before Singapore could join Malaya, Singapore should clean up this communist.
Was it Tunku's idea?
British, Tengku,
Okay.
everybody agreed, you know. Lee Kuan Yew agreed. So it was to be named Ops Cold Store. It was to be launched at the end of, I think, December '62. Yeah? So we were ready. We had spent time housing them, where they were living, their habits, you know, at what time we'd be in the house, blah, blah, blah. I would come and strike them, and those of Semenanjung origin will take back there, and those strictly of Singapore origin will be interned here, you see. So that December, I was all ready when this SP Sinibasakam, this very bright Indian officer, came in and said, "Sir, we have to stand down. We are not moving tonight." I said, "Why not?" "Oh, they still haven't come to agreement there in Tengku's residence." At the last moment, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew balked at the idea of this Operation Singapore, you see. That will probably make him look as if he is the bad guy, you know,
right.
in the whole scheme of things. You see.
Yes.
So he suggested to Tengku, "Why didn't you arrest also people here in Semenanjung?" Tengku said, "You must be mad. I'm not the one with the problem. You are the one with the problem. Look, I'm going to sleep. When you come to your senses, you just wake me up." So off he went to sleep. You see, that's Tengku. You know. It was late at night, so then we were told, you know, not likely, we were to stand down, you see, because Lee Kuan Yew also won't give way.
So what happened?
I think 1.5 months or 2 months before Lee Kuan Yew agreed, and it was launched. I think it was February of '63, I think.
Right.
Yeah. We had 2 series of that, Op Cold Store 1, Op Cold Store 2.
Right.
Yeah.
But Lim Chin Siong, in a video interview that I saw, insisted he was not a communist. Is that true?
Well, we don't know, you see, but we make no strong distinction between a communist, a non-communist, or an anti-communist, so long as they work towards the communist cause or contribute to the success of the communist cause. You see. This is what we call fellow traveling. You see. You have your own objective. The communists have their own objectives. You travel together. You only separate after you reach a certain point, you see. But during that fellow traveling, you're already enabling the communists to get closer to the objective. So for us, we don't care at that time, you know. We take them all in. Then we sort out. So many people don't understand this.
Right. Because
How
it could be
he,
misconstrued
he
as...
was an anti-communist. Yes,
it could be misconstrued as Mr. Lee wanting to kill off an opponent, you know, or
no.
because Mr. Lim Chin Siong was very
He
popular.
did not prepare the files. We from the Federation prepared the files.
So that part, we entered the merger and then we were expelled. Can you share with us some of the events leading to Singapore's expulsion?
We never wanted, you see, Singapore, because the Chinese problem. Pardon my saying so.
No, that's fine. Please.
But Lee Kuan Yew realized that as well. So he wrote in his book, Battle for Merger, if you read, and I said, look, he said, when we established PAP, UMNO was one of the first organizations to congratulate us. But after they achieved independence in 1957, UMNO had been trying to get further away from us. Why? Is it? Because we are Chinese and the Malays are afraid of us. So, to make ourselves more acceptable to the Malays, we must make sure that the symbols the Malays treasure, is it, are taken into our institutions. That
so we had the
our language will be Malay.
Yes, we had the crescent on our
language will
flag.
be Malay. Our flag will display, you know, Islamic symbols. So all these things were considered by him, you see, to appease the Malays. And the Malays, as usual, they are stronger on form than on substance. So with Singapore willing to make Yusof Shah its president, you know, and first president, and the language being Malay, blah, blah. Well, it softened our resistance to having Singapore in. I would say we welcome, you know, with open arms, but it's softened. Is it? And of course, with the agreement that, you know, you don't take part in our municipal election, is it?
But it didn't work. It didn't
After
last.
Singapore, after Lee Kuan Yew failed to displace MCA, you know, from this Malayan coalition, you see, then he decided to go all out, and that was to preach a Malaysian Malaysia. And he challenged the view that Malaya belonged to the Malays. You see? The Malays themselves were immigrants, you see. You see? That shocked us, you see. It worked up the Chinese. You see? In Malaya, of course, by 1963, more Chinese had become citizens because they became citizens gradually, you know. As they qualified, they became citizens. So, more had become there. And that included people who had never mixed with the Malays before. These were Chinese who were settled in new villages as part of the measures to break the back of the communists, you see. So they had lived only amongst the Chinese. They didn't understand the Malays. And the Malays also didn't understand them, you see. So you get more of these people out there. So you can see the effect on society. Then came Singapore with this very radical idea, isn't it? That caused a lot of heartache, and I think we're moving towards a racial clash.
How would you describe Tunku as a leader? Because
Tunku was an easygoing, he was an easygoing aristocrat. Father was a sultan, but with a chip on the shoulder, because his mother was the younger wife, you see. So it's only his half brothers from the first wife who could be sultan or whatever, you know. And he probably felt that he was the better man, you know, in the father's family, you see. And that was reflected also in the timing of his handing over to Tun Razak, when his own nephew became the Agung. He said, I can't bend down to my own nephew. So he was that kind of man. He was a man about town, maybe more so than Lee Kuan Yew, is it? Mixed with everybody by virtue of being exposed to the British, you know. So he had no, I think, had no feeling of insecurity with them, you know. Very generous to a fault when it comes to minor matters. You see? His favorite phrase would be "biak pi lah." Let it be, you know. Biak pi. And the Malays were fretting about that, you see, because many of the things that he said biak pi to actually was accommodation for the Chinese and the non-Malays, you see. We have this agreement. Why can't they follow the agreement? Why did they want more? Is it? So that was the complaint of the Malays, you see, that agreements are made to be kept, but they're not being kept. They want changes, blah blah blah. You know? So Tengku biak pi lah. I mean, small matter, you know. But on big matters, Tengku could be quite intransigent. He knows it.
What was Lee Kuan Yew like? How do you feel about Lee Kuan Yew as a leader?
Oh, I had enormous admiration of Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. We used to listen to his Fullerton Square lunchtime oratory. You know. So we were quite caught up, mesmerized by all this, you know. He was one who gives you the impression that he was incisive, that he took great pains to prepare his case. We all knew it, you know. He would have dummy runs. For all the big things, he would have dummy runs. But most of all, many of us of my generation admired him for his ethical standing. If at all I would fault him, would be on his inability to show a real understanding or warmth born out of friendship. You see? He was always the legal man. Well, if you want this, you know, I mean, what are you going to give me? So, quid pro quo became a very popular phrase in Kuala Lumpur, because that was what Lee Kuan Yew would always say. What's my quid pro quo? What's my quid pro quo? On the Malaysian side, of course, they're not like that. They're more heart than head. Is it? Form, so important to them, you see.
So did you believe those tears on the TV screen, you know, the famous video of Mr. Lee Kuan Yew crying at the separation announcement at the press conference?
Yes, I saw that, but a lot of people in Kuala Lumpur doubted that it was genuine, because they thought Lee Kuan Yew can now be Prime Minister of an independent state. You see? So what is he crying for? Unless, of course, I'm being so ambitious, so able, you know, such a belief in his genes, you know, that unless he thought that had Singapore remained in Malaysia, he probably could work his way up to become the Prime Minister of Malaysia, a larger nation.
There was another factor, and that's Goh Keng Swee. Right? And Goh Keng Swee, of course, has been working very closely with Tan Siew Sin on matters of economic development. So I read in an interview with Mr. Goh Keng Swee that he didn't think the merger was going to work because Malaysia would stand in the way of Singapore's economic initiatives. And so leaving the Federation was going to be a better solution. And so it didn't come as a surprise.
Because Tengku bemoaned in one of his books, you see, that Xiu Xin put spanners in the works.
Yes, that's right.
Now, Xiu Xin, of course, MCA president. Kuan Yew, PAP, wanted to displace this comprado class party, you know, with the PAP to represent the Chinese. But Tengku would have none of it because Tengku was very loyal, loyal to a fault. So that's why I think Lee Kuan Yew gave up the idea of waiting longer, you know, because no way Tengku would separate from the MCA.
One last question for you. We've been talking about leadership. I know some of the values that you would hold on to. What would your advice be for this current generation of Malaysian leaders or the next generation?
I think we have to roll back. There's no question about it.
You know?
We have to roll back from our progression towards a less ethical society. When Tun Razak succeeded Tunku Abdul Rahman, his second brother said to me, Hanif, that's the end of so-and-so, Rahman, another younger brother who was in business. I said, why? Because Razak will tell the Treasury not to give him any projects, not to give him any contracts. That was what it was before.
Wow, impressive.
Today, when your brother becomes Prime Minister or your father becomes Prime Minister, there'll be a big celebration because you think, wealth is going to pour down your way. That's how far we have degenerated. And I was, of course, attached very closely to Razak. And he kept on reminding his wife, look, I don't have the money. So be careful about how you spend. When he was the one and only source of power after the May 1369 incident, I was with him in the National Operations Council. He was worried he might be killed, and if so, what would happen to the wife? They had a small house way back there, in Petaling Jaya. How would Raha send Najib and other sons to the St. John's school in Kuala Lumpur? Lived so far away. So he thought of getting a piece of land in the center there, in Bangsa, and build a small house there. But when he went to discuss with the owner of Selangor Properties, Datin Wen said it was 220 a square foot and wouldn't budge because that set is it's a listed company where you can, and he was the most powerful man in the country. And what did he do? He just said, well, I can't afford it, he said. I walked away from that, grabbed a police officer, somebody who later on became my deputy, and said, let's go to Singapore and see. I hear some of our civil servants have bought pieces of land, cheaply. Let's see whether I can still get a piece of land there.
That's admirable. Thank you very much for all your sharing. Thank you so much.